top secret, soundproof headquarters of this Spurs Insider podcast. This is the latest edition of the Spurs Insider podcast in the 2020s with sports editor Nick Talbot and beat writers Tom Orsborn and Jeff McDonald. This is Mike Finger, and as we start the 20s of the Spurs Insider podcast, the Spurs are still a playoff team at the moment.
It's a miracle.
Are we buying this?
The bottom of the West is so bad.
Exactly.
It's just
Who, if not the Spurs, who are you buying for that 8th spot?
Well, we could just jump right into this. The Spurs, as we're recording this on the second day of the 2020s, as they're preparing to host the Oklahoma City Thunder in what might be the Spurs' best chance at a victory for a while, considering the upcoming schedule. They have a 3-game lead in the loss column on the whole field right now in the playoffs, and that's really saying something considering how bad the Spurs have seemed to be playing lately.
it's just incredible. I mean, how bad can the Portland Trailblazers be? I mean, they went out and signed Carmelo Anthony. That's quality stuff.
That's good stuff.
But are they? You say considering how bad they're playing, but of late, a little.
They've been. I mean, when
uptick.
you look at like the last 10 games of everybody who's competing for that spot, I mean, the Spurs I think are 6-4 over the last 10.
yeah.
That's like miles ahead of Sacramento.
I think it's the
and
record
Phoenix.
thing. What are they? As we sit here, they're 14-18, and if you had told me on New Year's Day they would be 14-18, I'd say, well, the playoffs are just a non-starter. Like, it's time to blow it up,
Right.
and blow it up.
They need to take every game to overtime.
Over the last 10, the Portland Trailblazers are 4-6, the Grizzlies 5-5, the Suns 2-8, the Timberwolves 2-8, and the Kings 1-9.
Exactly.
I'm going
awful.
to predict on February 1st, the Phoenix Suns will be in 8th place. I'm not saying they're going to end up making the playoffs, but I think that is the team that will be in 8th place when this month is over.
Do you think Ayton makes that big of a difference?
I think it's all. I'm basing it mostly on schedule.
I looked at that too today, and just because I was curious, as we're talking about what awaits the Spurs after this Oklahoma City game, where they could conceivably lose 6 games in a row. I mean, 6 games. There's an at Memphis there.
Sure,
that is a coin flip.
they can lose any game they play, but yes, they have the toughest January.
They might be
schedule.
underdogs in about 6 games in a row.
Yeah.
I like Jeff, I guess, looked at this. You were looking at what the other teams that are in the contention have over the next month, and it looked like Phoenix has one of the more favorable schedules during that time. But this is not something that's going to be solved by February 1st or March 1st or whatever.
I'm not predicting the Phoenix Suns are making the playoffs.
Right.
I'm just saying after this, the Spurs need to just weather this month. The problem is they weather this month, and then it's the rodeo trip.
Which is one of the toughest rodeo trips
Yes.
that they've had.
But just this next stretch, we were talking about this with somebody the other day. Like the 7 games beginning tonight against Oklahoma City, it's like, could they win 3 of those? And if they do, that's probably good enough.
3 would be a cause for celebration.
That's probably good enough.
Well, LaMarcus is probably going to go off for 70 tonight.
Right.
I mean, it's the Thunder.
And part of it is winning. The Thunder are a decent team, but winning
Yes.
at home against the Thunder would be one of those things.
These are the types of games, when you look back at the schedule at the end of the year, that they're going to have to win more of these types of these coin flip games at home, especially because there's nobody in the West that you're an overwhelming favorite against, other than the Warriors, who just took them to overtime at home.
Now, at the beginning of the season, everyone thought the Thunder were going to be a team that was tanking. They thought, oh, yeah, we're trading Chris Paul, Steven Adams. He's going to be on the block. All these guys. Trading Danilo Gallinari. Traded. They could get up to the 6th spot, maybe.
Or they could decide to sell still and fall out.
That's true. And then the West would be really bad.
Really, when it's all said and done, the team that comes in 8th is going to be the team that wants it. And I don't mean that tries hard. I mean at some point, as the season goes on, the teams that are going to be sellers are sellers. The teams that would rather be in the lottery will find a way to be in the lottery. And so where I give the Spurs an advantage as far as getting that 8th place is they're the team that wants it.
Yeah.
Yes, much to the chagrin of many San Antonians.
The tank brigade.
Though that's absolutely true. The Spurs are of all those teams the least likely to just say, "Hey, we're going to sell."
Yeah.
And that's not a statement as to whether that's smart or not or right or not. It's just a statement as to what is. They are because of a variety of factors and circumstances. It's going to take a lot for them to say, "Let's blow it up," where it wouldn't take as much for a Sacramento or Phoenix to do the same thing. Or even Portland.
It really depends on where all these teams are at, because the first round is going to be who gets swept by the Lakers and Clippers. Right. Do you actually care if that's the case? And the Spurs are the only team that care because they got a streak going.
When we were talking about this earlier, maybe a month or so ago, about when the Spurs would decide to sell, if they would decide to sell, the factor was, well, if it keeps going like this, then they're going to have no choice. It's starting to look like they're always going to have a choice because no one is going to run away with that 8 seed, and they're always going to kind of be in it unless things just really, really, really go south.
Yeah, I feel like they're looking for reasons to convince themselves that they can make the playoffs, and if you're looking for reasons, you can find them.
Yeah,
they're there, they're playing better. It's all coming together.
Yeah.
So why sell? Like, you could make the argument it's better for their long-term future if they were like 10 games out of a playoff berth right now, because then they would have no choice, and you're going to trade DeMar and you're going to gather assets. But if your goal is to make the playoffs and you're there right now, I don't think you can trade DeMar.
Devil's advocate, there's really not – if you don't win the lottery, there's not a whole lot of difference between the pick that comes with the 8 seed as opposed to the pick that comes with the 9th or 10th seed.
Right.
You feel better about the chance, we have a chance to win the lottery, but the chances are really, really, really low.
No,
so there's no sense in tanking to be in 10th place or 9th place.
Right. I mean, and I don't think you can tank, as we mentioned, as bad as the West is, I don't know that you can tank well enough to increase your odds that much.
Right.
The Warriors are doing a good job. They just have everyone injured.
And it
sort of comes naturally.
One contingent in San Antonio that would really like to see them make the playoffs, of course, is ownership.
Right.
That's that's nothing to sneeze at.
Well,
marketing's always paramount with this team.
Well, and Tom, I'm not sure if you brought this up recently, but you can probably speak to this because you are well sourced in all this. The Spurs are a franchise where that one playoff series really matters in terms of the bottom line.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, and it always has. They've never made a secret of wanting that playoff money. And you look at the attendance, which they're going to say is a sellout every game, but we know otherwise. I mean, they want to market something.
Right.
So winning's important for this bunch. Always has been.
And when you're Greg Popovich, if this is conceivably going to be your last season, why do you want to go out purposefully losing?
Especially, it's not. Sorry for that. It's not a binary choice in terms of either compete for the 8th spot or like tank and go to build for the future and get all these picks. Like, there's a middle ground there. Sometimes it can just because you start tanking doesn't mean you're going to get the next Tim Duncan or David Robinson or Luka or whoever. To me, forcing this decision between either going for it or not going for it, that's kind of not what actually happens in the NBA. Jeff said it before. It resolves itself most of the time.
Yeah, the only problem with them not tanking or going for that playoff spot is that you have two assets in LaMarcus Aldridge and DeMar DeRozan.
That's kind of
whose contracts are going to expire fairly soon, and you'd like to get something for them.
DeMar is the one that will force its issue first because he has a chance to opt out.
Right, because if they leave for nothing, then you're definitely tanking.
Right.
Is there any reason you couldn't trade DeMar this summer?
Well, he would have to opt in, wouldn't he?
Yes. I mean, but that happens a lot. And you opt in, and it's almost like a sign and trade.
Correct. That's a.
But there's nothing.
Option.
But there's nothing that says the trade deadline comes and goes, and oh no, we're stuck with DeMar possibly walking.
There is also no reason to think you could not trade DeMar during this season at the deadline and not seriously change your chances to make the playoffs.
There's some nights I think that's fair, and then some nights I don't, which kind of tells you how DeMar DeRozan plays.
Yeah, he's either 7 of 18, and you're like, "Oof, that was a bad game,"
or playing well lately.
He's got a really good stretch.
Or if he goes 12 of 18, it looks very efficient, and he's very needed.
All of these questions seemed complicated 2 months ago, and they have not resolved themselves really at all. It almost seems more complicated now than it was.
Well, here's the deal. Like, as we know this, as long as Greg Popovich is the coach, they are going to try to make the playoffs.
Yes.
So if it's they're going to try to make the playoffs. So either they're going to make the playoffs, extend that streak, that's fine. or they're not, and they're going to be in the lottery, and we get to see these lottery picks that everybody has been clamoring for, and that's fine too. They're sort of like in this sort of, it's fine, everything's fine.
Everything is fine.
The era of everything.
Everything's
fine.
on fire, but
The
it's
era
fine.
of good feelings.
Yeah, man, it could be worse. I mean, I thought Portland was going to be like the 5th or 6th seed this year, and they're just a dumpster fire. I mean, they're just not good.
Yeah. Portland, Sacramento, Phoenix. Who else is in that group?
Minnesota, I thought would be better.
Minnesota. There's nobody that jumps out at you of that group that's just going to run away with it.
No, Sacramento and Portland could get healthy.
Memphis is coming on with Ja Morant.
Yeah, but they also just lost by 30 to your Spurs at home.
That's true.
Mm-hmm.
Jeff just mentioned in passing about when we could see more lottery picks being played, or more, or first-round draft picks at least. And the theme of the podcast all season long, or one thing that we keep going back to, is Lonnie Walker. And Tom Ringo Starr Orsborn became one of
a Twitter sensation.
He became a Twitter sensation, a hero of sorts.
A hero.
Only because someone puts it on Twitter, which
Yeah.
I don't like.
You don't. Ringo never likes the spotlight.
No, he doesn't. He likes to sit in the back and play his drums.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Anyway, Tom, to clarify all this Lonnie Walker stuff. Many times, several times, multiple times,
Every day.
over the course of the season, there has been some form of, hey, what can Lonnie Walker do to play more? Hey,
Well-
what can what are you seeing from Marco? What are you seeing from Lonnie? Do you see more minutes from Lonnie? Tom this time put it in a way that I think was the most clear-cut, black and white type question. Is it, how can Lonnie Walker play more minutes? And then I think Pop created this more than anything when he said, "What are you asking me? Why he doesn't play more?" And Tom basically says yes, and then Tom says, we don't talk about this to the media. And
Pop said that.
Pop said that.
Yeah.
Sorry,
That's all right.
sorry for the confusion. But I mean, this is what we've always known. There have been 10 different ways where Pop has kind of made it clear that he's not going to let people in on his thought processes.
Yeah, and I wasn't championing the
Right.
pro Lonnie brigade. It's just he played garbage time. He'd been playing pretty steadily, and then he plays garbage time in Memphis, doesn't play at all the next game.
Yeah.
So it's just a question.
Right.
So what's going on? What is he doing or not doing
Right.
that is preventing him from playing?
And Pop
the
is
answer was predictable. Yeah.
Right. The answer was predictable, and yet people love Tom because now he is because of what the conclusion that people drew is that Tom Orsborn is the biggest proponent of the Lonnie Walker Brigade in San Antonio.
I've also been accused of being the biggest proponent of friend of the broadcast, Marco Bellinelli.
That's true.
So I'm playing both sides.
Yes. But the thing here is, and we can get into this too, some readers / fans /
People are saying.
listeners of the podcast, people are saying
Person on the street.
that it should be your job, Tom Orsborn and Jeff McDonald, as beat writers, to put pressure on Pop.
That always goes so well. This is a man you can't even use the word "how" in front of a question with.
First of all, that's
Sorry.
First of all, to be clear, that's not their job. It's not the job of the beat writer to influence decisions or to make sure that the coach plays the best lineup. That's just, even if Pop was playing a terrible lineup, that we knew without a shadow of a doubt was the terrible lineup, and Jeff knew that another lineup was better. It's not Jeff's job to make Pop play the best lineup. Jeff doesn't care who wins or loses.
Mm-hmm.
Tom doesn't care who wins or loses. He doesn't have a rooting interest in this.
Right. You ask Pop, why'd you play that lineup? He gives you some answer, and
Right.
then the columnist makes fun of it.
Right.
That's the way it's supposed to be.
That's the way it's supposed to be. Second of all,
And occasionally, back to Halloween night
yeah,
in Los Angeles,
Oh, yeah.
he's going to say something that's
right.
noteworthy
Calculated.
or
Tom-
reveal. Yeah.
And
he's gonna-
calculated.
Yes, absolutely.
We asked a very similar. Tom and I both. I think that was 2 questions in a row. Very similar as to why Lonnie was pulled so quickly on Halloween night, and that answer, Pop was like, he's terrible, or
Yeah.
he didn't do a good job of taking advantage of his opportunities. Those are the answers you're looking for.
Yeah.
Anyway, your second of all?
Second of all is the thought, the mere idea of Jeff McDonald or Mike Finger or Tom Orsborn placing pressure on Greg Popovich is just absurd on its face. On any reporter.
Yes.
He hasn't had pressure since his freshman year at Air Force, probably, when they're plebes or whatever they're called.
Just
cadets.
To play that scenario out to where Greg Popovich, who has more wins total than any coach in NBA history, he's won 5 championships here. He can coach as long as he wants. Like the ownership group, the GM, the president, nobody is going to say, Pop, you need to go away. He can coach as long as he wants. He's never going to get fired. He's never going to be even admonished for losing. It's just not going to happen. And the idea that because somebody asks him a question pregame, he's going to completely change his thoughts as to what he thinks is best for the team. Presumably, he's not benching Lonnie because he thinks Lonnie can help him, or that he thinks Lonnie's a better option. He's benching Lonnie because he thinks that somebody else is a better option.
Yeah.
So you think that Greg Popovich is, because Tom Orsborn asked me this question pregame, I need to rethink my whole game strategy here, or because the pressure is getting to me and the people on Twitter are upset about me playing Marco too much? It's outrageous.
Jeff put it best. On any given night, he's going to go with the guy he thinks is going to help him
And
win.
you're all free to decide that's crazy.
Yes.
Like he's wrong. But it's like asking us to put pressure on a Supreme Court justice.
Yes.
Like there's nothing we could say or do that's going to affect his job one iota.
Except, like, putting pressure on a Supreme Court justice, like you could say there's like morality there, and that you're fighting for good or whatever. But like,
What
Bob,
world are you living in?
Who cares?
That's not the way it works at all.
But
Pollyanna?
yeah,
That's a different podcast, though.
We're venturing into the politics, puro politics podcast here.
We're going to start a Spurs Insider podcast spinoff called Pollyanna. And by the way, while we're talking about the podcast, subscribe to this podcast on all the forums. Subscribe to the Spurs Nation newsletter. Go to expressnews.com for all your Spurs coverage. It was kind of maybe coincidental that night when Tom asked the question, like Lonnie did get some first quarter run there.
Mm-hmm. No, maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was the pressure. Maybe it was Tom putting the screws to Gregory Charles Popovich.
What's your overall gauge as to where the Lonnie Walker experience is as we head into the 2020s?
I don't like having this discussion because I end up coming off as I don't think Lonnie's any good, because you go into the reasons why he hasn't played as much as people think he should play. So I don't like having that discussion.
God forbid we talk about anything that makes Jeff uncomfortable.
So I'm going to. There's a lot of thoughts in my head that I don't think I'm going to say. So I'm going to preface it by saying that if I were the coach of the Spurs, I would, 1, drive a better car, but 2, I would play Lonnie Walker more too, if I were the coach of the Spurs. But when he does play, you can see why sometimes he doesn't play as much as the fans would want him to play.
Yeah, you know,
he's very good at running the floor. He's the most athletic player on the roster. When he's out, when you get on the break, he's going to finish it for you. But what else has he really done consistently well?
And that same night, or it might have been another night, it all runs together, but Rudy Gay, I thought, had some very insightful comments trying to speak, read between the lines type comments on Lonnie, saying that, he's a 21-year-old kid, played 1 season at Miami. This isn't high school. This isn't 1 season at Miami. It's a whole different ball game. Yeah. And he also said it's good to see him finally. It's about time, was the word he said about his alley-oop dunk that Rudy fed him, which to me said he's not fully he doesn't know how to harness everything that he's got yet. And it's just going to take time. And that's why Pop's playing him sparingly or slowly.
And it's not like there's an outcry from the rest of the team that's upset that Marco is playing and that Lonnie is not playing enough.
Yeah, they always say, hey, Marco, at least you got to pay attention to him all the time when he's out there.
The only upswell is from Twitter.
I mean, I would play Lonnie Walker more too.
Yeah.
I would. Mm-hmm. But I can see why when he does, aside from that Houston game, has he... I can't even think of a shot he's made outside of 3 feet. And
he's made a few threes.
And defensively, he's got that. He's got the athletic tools, but he's not always in the right place.
Well, when we've talked to people around the team throughout the first couple of months about where he has to come along the farthest. They want to see more on the defensive end from him, not just like athleticism wise, but focus.
Right.
And
right. That's the point I'm making.
And what Jeff said earlier, which I believe is generally true about Pop always making decisions based on who gives him the best chance to win that night. I think for the most part that's true, but I think there's some asterisks that apply here in that Pop also, with young players, historically, when he's developing them, he's thinking about what's going to pay off for them in the long run. And
exactly.
So even if he thought, hey, if I play Lonnie Walker more minutes tonight against Oklahoma City than I do Marco Bellinelli, that might give us a slightly better chance. But I also want to think about Lonnie Walker's whole career, and I want to ingrain and instill
exactly
habits and teach him what he has to do to get on the floor. Marco's kind of who he is. He's, in some cases, a sunk cost for the Spurs. Pop doesn't need to be teaching him lessons about things because he's going to be gone in a year. But I think that there is something to be said for the idea that in a season in which the Spurs are not competing for an NBA title, that this can be a big growth year for Lonnie Walker. And growth for Lonnie Walker does not just come from being thrown on the court for 25 minutes a game.
To do whatever you want.
To do whatever you want. Like, a big part of this year is for Lonnie Walker to learn to do what Pop wants him to do. And so the benching could be as big of a long-term learning tool for Lonnie as playing could be. And if this comes off as like defending Pop or taking Pop's side, you know, I will say like Jeff did, I probably would play him more. But like Pop's not an idiot. Like I think there's a lot of Tom Orsborn just recoiled at that. He was shocked that I said that. I think there's more layers to this decision than Lonnie versus Marco.
Right. And a guy that's been in the league 10 years is just going to get more leeway than a guy than along the lines you're saying, than a second-year player. And I think Pop would rather have, if you're going to make mistakes, Pop would rather, this guy knows where he's supposed to be. He's just too unathletic to get there, right, as opposed to this guy doesn't even know where he's supposed to be.
Yeah. And somebody said to me, why did Bryn and Derek play more, early in their second year? Why? Well, look at their work in college.
Yeah.
It was much more extensive. I mean,
also
they came
injuries.
better.
Also, yeah.
They came better prepared, though.
And I mean, if you look back on it, I mean, going back to the thing where you just, as you bank that trust, you get more rope. I mean, Tony Parker's getting pulled for Speedy Claxton back in the day. Mm-hmm. Tony Parker is, I think we can all say, a miles better player than Speedy Claxton, but that was Pop grooming him. Manu got away with tons more stuff as he grew up than he did as a rookie or second-year player. It's just part of the growth process for this team.
Yep. So when you look ahead at this, what do we think of the rest of January? I mean, is there a chance, Tom, I think you've written, and Jeff too, about how some of the guys are saying that this New Year feels like a reset and that they have figured something out and they're going to play better now than they did, but the schedule makes that difficult.
Right.
How much validity is there to that?
Well, they kind of have an identity now with everything predicated on the drive and kick, and LaMarcus now stepping out. It seems to be working, a formula that works. They're playing better defense on the perimeter. They're making shots now.
They can play better and still, lose more games than they win just based on the schedule. I mean, going from here to playing Milwaukee 2 games in a row is just brutal. Brutal. And then Boston. And then Memphis is like your break game, but they've already beaten you once this year,
I will say one pleasant surprise for this season, because I mentioned it talking to LaMarcus in Media Day, and he kind of downplayed the whole idea of shooting more threes. He's the one that's actually kind of embracing it. And he's doing what a lot of people thought he should have done.
Yeah, how many games are we on now where he's been really actively shooting threes? He did it a couple times earlier this season, but now we've got a real trend of him actually getting out there and doing it. And amazingly, it works in today's NBA, and so it's working.
Yeah.
Career high in back-to-back games, and he seems to really have embraced it.
I think that's a big key to make everything go.
He's embraced it without forcing it too. It's just like if it's there, he takes it.
Yeah.
Which is the way you do it.
The other development since the last podcast we had, I think DeJounte Murray's played really well lately. And,
yes.
And he Jeff, you pointed out, he moved to the bench, kind of came back from the bench. A different kind of player, would you say?
He just seemed to have more things figured out than he did prior to the benching, and I don't know specifically what those were. A different player isn't right, but he just seems a little calmer, maybe
A little more efficient.
Yeah, maybe that's the way to put it.
Got benched a little bit in that overtime game the other night, and came back and dominated or shined in overtime. And Patty said that's a sign of his growth. There was a little pouting before, and it's gone now.
I'm going to be honest here. I was sitting up in the rafters with, or not the rafters. They have me with the rafters now, with our buddy Matthew Tynan, and they bring in DeJounte with like 28 seconds into overtime. They bring him in for Derek, and I'm like, I don't know, man. I kind of like Derek in these situations right now. He just seems to have a little more of a feel for these late game situations, and darned if DeJounte didn't just win the game for him in overtime, which is why I'm not Greg Popovich.
What's the breakdown on combined Derek DeJounte minutes? Have there been more of those
increasing?
Lately?
Yeah, they are increasing for sure. I noticed he definitely did that at the end of the game when they needed to stop the other day. And who was it? One of those Warriors that are nameless. I think it was Alec Burks. Alec Burks. He hit that shot on LaMarcus to force overtime, but they did have their best defensive lineup out there at that point.
Is the defense getting better as a whole, do you think?
Statistically, it is.
Yeah, they say so. They say they figured out the pick and roll. Their rotations are better. They're just playing.
I think they were 12th
on the perimeter,
December, which is vastly improved.
They had lots of ebbs and flows last year with the defense too, where it's like, well, it's fixed.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then the next month
it's never going to be totally
they're
fixed.
last again. So no, they just don't have the players to have a great defense.
Yeah.
When this stretch is over of these games where they're going to be underdogs for a while, is let's say they lose 5 of the next 6. Does that change the outlook much if they're still? Because I think they're still going to be right there at 8, 9.
Not if Portland loses 5 of 6, and
yeah.
I mean that's the problem that we discussed earlier. It's just someone has to pull away, and at this point, why not the Spurs?
And it's like they get back from that stretch, and then it's like, well, here comes Atlanta. I mean, again, they can lose all these games, but if you look at it on paper, here comes Atlanta, here comes Phoenix again, here comes New Orleans, here comes Chicago, here comes Charlotte. Like you have ways to build it back up. I think they're going to tread water a lot for a while, and I think so are a lot of teams.
Treading water might be enough. I was going to say,
yeah, that's what I mean.
Playing 500 ball might be pulling away.
Playing 500 the rest of the year probably gets them a spot.
I think for sure gets them a spot.
Oh, terrible. It's like the East.
Yeah.
That's going out on a limb there. Well, I think the bottom line with all of this is the next time we meet for a Spurs Insider podcast, and probably the 2-3 times after that, we're probably going to be talking about the same things in terms of the outlook of this team, about possible moves. I think it's kind of a waiting game for a while. And if the Spurs can get through, like was mentioned earlier in this podcast, if they can get through January with 3-4 wins, at least up until that Atlanta game, that's going to qualify as a success and probably keep them right where they are.
Right. Like, yeah. So I just don't know where those 3. Well,
the NBA will always surprise you.
Yeah, Milwaukee. I mean, back-to-back against Milwaukee. Milwaukee has to travel down here. Anything can happen.
Spurs got to travel back too, though.
Yeah.
That's always.
I don't know.
Those always favor the weaker team because it's hard to beat the same team twice in a row. Probably not as hard as. Probably not hard enough to make Milwaukee lose one of them, but we'll see. That is what we have to look forward to for the next couple of weeks here in January. We'll see if the Spurs can survive. We will get back on a more regular update after the holidays here in the 2020s in the Spurs Insider Podcast, and we will talk to you next time. Until then, take care of each other and keep it real.